Tonight on The Wrap, who has the upper hand in the Strait of Hormuz? Growing tensions as the US and Iran continue their battle for control of the shipping lane. President Trump calls on Tehran to give up the struggle.
They should wave the white flag of surrender.
Says it will host the cruise ship at the centre of a deadly hantavirus outbreak. As the Foreign Office says, it's working to get stranded British travellers off the liner. Plans to fast-track hate crime prosecutions as the Prime Minister chairs a summit to drive forward the UK's response to a series of attacks on the Jewish community. Police are blamed for a culture of misogyny and complacency as they missed warning signs in the murder of a show jumper in Northern Ireland. But we discuss today's biggest stories with the broadcasters Sonia Soda and Ali Miraj, plus a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including a warning of prolonged inflation as UK borrowing costs soar. Well, good evening to you, Sonia and Ali. Welcome to both of you as well. Well, since Donald Trump decided to pick a fight with Iran back in February, we've had some mixed messages. The military operation would soon be over. Iran has been begging for a ceasefire, but it is the Strait of Hormuz that has remained the main point of contention throughout. And tonight, both the US and Iran have laid claim to control of the key shipping lane. Sonia, Ali, is anybody in control?
The Iranians, as Friedrich Merz said, might be humiliating the US. There's a Khamenei in charge. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, and the 400 kg of uranium is yet to be found.
No, it's just a complete mess. I agree with Ali. I think the US launched this intervention in Iran thinking it was going to be over very quickly. It's not. And this chaos in the Strait of Hormuz is having a huge knock-on impact on economies worldwide.
Well, plenty in the Trump administration have certainly been speaking today, including the US Defence Secretary, who maintains the ceasefire with Iran is holding. Yet Tehran has sent dozens of missiles and drones towards the United Arab Emirates in the past 24 hours. For President Trump, a belief there's one way to end the deadlock: Iran should throw in the towel.
They should wave. They're very proud. Maybe you won't see a white flag, but essentially that's already what they need. They should wave the white flag of surrender.
Well, speaking earlier then, the Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the truce was not over, but as he hailed a new initiative to escort ships through the strait, Tehran claimed its control over the waterway had intensified. At the same time, the United Arab Emirates said it was coming under further attack from Iran.
No, the ceasefire is not over. Ultimately, this is a separate and distinct project, and we expected there would be some churn at the beginning, which happened. And we said we would defend and defend aggressively, and we absolutely have. Iran knows that. And ultimately, the president's going to make a decision whether anything were to escalate into a violation of a ceasefire. But certainly we would urge Iran to be prudent in the actions that they take to keep that underneath this threshold. This is about the straits. This is about freedom of navigation. This is about international waterways. This is about free flow of commerce, all the things that happened before, and only Iran is contesting. So right now, the ceasefire certainly holds, but we're going to be watching very, very closely.
Pete Hegseth. So let us bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, who is at the White House. So Project Freedom to the Americans, Project Deadlock to the Iranians, who've reissued a map showing what they control, James. But Marco Rubio saying that this is about saving 23,000 sailors in international water. Is this effort by the Americans to take control likely to work?
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Over the course of today, Anna, I think we've had a day of the Americans reframing the conflict and its part in it, less as an offensive military act and more of a defensive operation. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, that was the tone from him. And it was the same from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He spoke of defensive US actions in the Strait of Hormuz. Rubio spoke of civilians trapped. He called Iran's blockade desperate and destructive, and he presented America's action now as almost benevolent, humanitarian, entirely in keeping with an administration recharacterizing its involvement as it appeals for international help to break the impasse. It's becoming a consistent message from the Americans, this call for other countries to engage in diplomacy. The US is now pushing a resolution to the UN Security Council looking for diplomatic support. Let's listen to Marco Rubio. He gave a news conference in the press room, acting as maternity cover, Anna, for Caroline Levitt, who, of course, is away having a baby.
The operation, Epic Fury, is concluded. We achieved the objectives of that operation. I'm not going to, we're not cheering for an additional situation to occur. We would prefer the path of peace. What the president would prefer is a deal. He would prefer to sit down, work out a memorandum of understanding for future negotiations that touches on all the key topics that have to be addressed, a full opening of the strait so the world can get back to normal. And he preferred that be negotiated through the route that Steve and Jared have been working and that all of us have been supporting. That's the route he prefers. That is so far not the route that Iran has chosen.
And Marco Rubio invoked international law. He said the Strait of Hormuz was an international waterway, so international law should apply. That will sit uneasily with critics who have questioned Donald Trump's adherence to international law. Those same critics wouldn't have missed Rubio's chat, his avowed wish at that news conference for the Strait to be back the way it was. It was, of course, not a problem before the US-Israeli action. One other thing, the Secretary of State, he highlighted the economic pain that Iran would suffer going forward. For me, accentuating one strand in this conflict that the Americans are prosecuting more successfully. But generally, Anna, I think the tone from the Trump administration has been less belligerent of late. That could be significant.
Yes, James, thank you very much indeed. Reporting there from the White House. One wonders where the confidence comes from, though. Pete Hegseth earlier saying that they are talking to companies, shipping companies and insurers. But even tonight, the UK Maritime Trade Operation Organisation said that they believe a cargo vessel has been struck by an unknown projectile. Here's the comments then from the UK MTO. As you can see, received a report of an incident within the Strait of Hormuz. A verified source reported a cargo vessel has been struck by an unknown projectile. Environmental impact is unknown at time of report. No doubt that will be updated. That's not long there. So the point is, who's going to be confident enough to go through? 2 vessels went through, but with heavily armed escort.
That's right. And it's really hard when you hear all this stuff coming out of the White House, out of the US administration. It's hard to know how much to sort of take what they're saying as read or how much of it is essentially just puff kind of diplomacy, because I think the White House is trying to project a sense that everything's calming down, that things will be OK, that this is all going to get resolved. But unfortunately, one of the things about the Trump administration is they often make claims that just don't stand up when it comes to diplomacy. They claim to have struck ceasefire agreements, to be coming up with peace plans. And actually, when you look at the detail, it all kind of disintegrates because it's not there. So I think it is very worrying. It's hard to see how this gets resolved. I said at the top of the programme, this is having a massive impact on economies around the world. It's impacting us here in the UK. The cost of UK borrowing has climbed up. We're going to be talking about that again. And I think governments around the world will just be looking at what's going on in the Strait and thinking we really need to be contingency planning for this going on for months, because it doesn't seem like there are any quick resolutions on the horizon. I
think Marco Rubio warmed to his role as a stand-in for Caroline Levitt, didn't he? But he called this very distinctly a defensive operation. We will not shoot unless we are shot at, and then proceeded to outline what he called more than 100 land and sea-based aircraft, what he called multi-domain unmanned platforms, presumably drones, and 15,000 troops who are taking part in this. And the point is, you can't open this unless you throw absolutely everything at it, because the Iranians, as I said before, have reissued a map showing what they think they are controlling.
It's a bit late to be talking about non-offensive action now, isn't it? I mean, into the 3rd month of this cat-handed debacle of a war. I mean, look, let's face it. Does anybody take a single word that Pistol Pete Hegseth says seriously anymore? I mean, it's completely incredible. They've got useless negotiators in Witkoff and Kushner, who are basically businessmen trying to negotiate this deal. The Pakistanis are trying to do their best. The longer this goes on, the more it suits the Iranians. They're consolidating their power. The IRGC has consolidated its position tenfold. It is rearming the longer this goes on. A protracted diplomatic situation suits the Iranians just fine. And meanwhile, the price at the petrol pump for the American consumer goes up and the world suffers at the same time. Trump has got into this. He's in too deep. It's a complete and utter mess. We're all paying the price for it. They've been humiliated. Look, I understand it's difficult for Donald Trump because he believes in hyperbole and all the rest of it. It's much easier to start wars, much more difficult to end them, particularly when you're dealing with an enemy that doesn't actually have a price. They actually have some principles, which you might not like because you don't try and bother to understand their perspective. And also they have a much higher pain threshold and risk appetite than you do because they're a theocracy, not a democracy.
Yes, and just for the point of Iran, they say they've set up a new body to manage vessel transit through the Strait of Hormuz. That's according to Iran's press TV. Also, in terms of the UAE, they have warned, or Iran's Joint Military Command has warned of a crushing response if any action is taken by the United Arab Emirates against Iran's islands, ports and coastlines, and then said they have not carried out any attack against the UAE in recent days. Clearly, our correspondent there, Sally Lockwood, was talking about the missiles, including cruise missiles, which have been sent in the direction of the UAE. So that is, that is confusing and befuddling. In the meantime, you mentioned it, the cost of borrowing and this story that millions face flight cancellations as jet fuel shortages deepen and the Iran ceasefire, they declare, is in tatters, suggesting actually that Britain is set to be among countries hardest hit by jet fuel shortages. Already thousands of flights in May have been cancelled. Full look at the papers coming up for you, though, at 10:30, of course. Now, let us move on, shall we, to the plight of British travellers who are stuck on board a cruise ship which has been hit by an outbreak of the deadly disease hantavirus. The Foreign Office says it is putting plans in place to bring them home. 3 people have died while a British man remains in intensive care. Well, in the past hour, Spain's health ministry has said it will host the liner in the Canary Islands. It's expected to arrive there in the next 3 to 4 days. Let's get more then. Here's Ashish Joshi.
It's sold as an Antarctic Odyssey, a spectacular 42-night cruise from the Antarctic Circle, crossing the equator to the coast of West Africa. A once-in-a-lifetime dream.
For going in the ice and spotting wildlife like whales, this is the perfect ship.
The ship's chef posted this picture on the night before they set sail. But Kabir Moraes, on the bottom right, and his shipmates on board the MV Hondias did not know that their dream would turn into a nightmare. Just 10 days into their cruise, a passenger died, others fell critically ill, and the ship is now at the centre of a suspected hantavirus outbreak. The MV Hondias set sail on the cruise, which cost anywhere between £6,000 and £18,000 on the 1st of April, from Argentina. It made its way through the southern Atlantic Ocean on its way to Cape Verde on the 3rd of May, and that's where it remains.
The plan now is for the ship to continue on to the Canary Islands. We're working with Spanish authorities who will welcome the ship, have said that they will welcome the ship, to do a full investigation, a full epidemiologic investigation, full disinfection of the ship, and of course to assess the risk of the passengers that are actually on board.
Hantavirus is spread through rodent droppings, urine or saliva. The virus particles, once dried out, can be breathed in. Early symptoms are like flu, but can turn into a deadly infection of the lungs or kidneys. Human-to-human transmission is extremely rare, but WHO experts think that this may be happening on board the Hondias. So far, 3 passengers have died, a German traveller and a Dutch couple, whose family paid this tribute. The beautiful journey they experienced together was abruptly and permanently cut short. We are still unable to comprehend that we have lost them. We wish to bring them home and commemorate them in peace and privacy. WHO medical experts are on board the ship. Critically ill passengers and crew will be medevaced. The Canary Islands had been mentioned as a possible destination, but there is pushback from the local authorities there.
They will be transferred to the Netherlands, and from there, once they've completed quarantine and so on, they would have to be repatriated. I believe the decision is the right one, not only for those passengers who are affected and need medical care, but also for everyone's safety, those on board the ship, as well as those of us on land.
For now, the ship remains marooned off the coast of Cape Verde. The ordeal for the passengers and crew of the MV Hondius is not yet over. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Yes, Ashish Joshi reporting there about Spanish authorities' reluctance to have this vessel come towards the Canary Islands. They are now accepting the vessel. We're also getting more information from the Cape Verde Health Ministry, who have just issued this in the last minute or so. In fact, the medical evacuation of 3 patients is expected to take place in the coming hours using 2 air ambulance planes in coordination with the relevant national and international authorities. One of the air ambulance planes is already in Cape Verde and a second aircraft is expected to arrive soon. So the suggestion was to take 3 passengers off this vessel and then proceed to the Canary Islands, either Gran Canaria or Tenerife, which will take 3 days of sailing. But, I mean, truly awful. And confirmation pretty much from the WHO today, given the incubation period of hantavirus, it is most likely it was brought onto this vessel and then there was human-to-human spread.
Yeah, which is incredibly rare. So it's a virus that's normally picked up from rodent faeces and urine. WHO say that it's got a long enough incubation period that they think that somebody picked it up, not on the ship, but in the port. I think it was sailing from Argentina originally. And it's just really awful. I mean, 3 people have lost their lives. There's a lot of people trapped on that ship now. There's been negotiations ongoing with the Cape Verde authorities to see whether the ship could dock there. Now this solution has been found with the Canaries. But, I mean, I think this is one of the risks, isn't it, of these... It's incredibly rare, this sort of illness. But if you're on a ship, you're in international waters. So there do need to be these negotiations. And I just can't imagine what it must be like if you've got a loved one on that ship. You must be beside yourself with worry, and people on the ship itself. I mean, this is supposed to be a holiday of a lifetime.
Yeah, bird watching, we were told today, is what many of them are doing, presumably outdoor activities. So it's close quarter, inside the boat that has led to the human-to-human contact, if that is proved to be what happened. Incubation of anywhere from 1 to 6 weeks. And the presumption is that the initial patient and his wife joined the boat in Argentina. Our assumption is that they were infected off the ship, perhaps doing some activities there. And in the meantime, the Foreign Office, backed up by Keir Starmer, suggests they're working closely with international partners to support British nationals on board and get them off, get them on, for safe onward travel. Some 19 British nationals were listed as passengers on the ship originally.
Look, that's all that can be done. Look, firstly, I do completely agree with what Sonia said. Thoughts are with people on the vessel, and the families must be beside themselves. I mean, as you say, you're in a very confined space. 3 people have died around you. I mean, extremely concerning. The authorities of different countries have to try and get their nationals off in a safe manner. We're all very well informed about viruses now after COVID, so it does bring a shiver down one's spine when you read this kind of thing, and it's extremely concerning. So yes, the British authorities need to do what they can, make sure that people are quarantined, make sure it can't spread any further, get them off the vessel as quickly as possible.
Well, let's bring you some more news emerging tonight, and that is that hate crime prosecutions are set to be fast-tracked because of the increase in the number of anti-Semitic attacks. This is the Director of Public Prosecutions who's issued new guidance to prosecutors because of what he called a deeply troubling rise in anti-Semitic incidents. Well, earlier the Prime Minister Keir Starmer warned that any attempts by Iran Iran to incite anti-Semitism or destabilise British society won't be tolerated as the UK government investigates possible foreign involvement in a series of hate-linked attacks. Prime Minister was speaking in Downing Street, where he was hosting an emergency meeting of senior figures from across public life to discuss tackling growing anti-Semitism in the UK.
We must also deal with the forces that drive this hatred in the first place. So we're confronting them directly. One of the lines of inquiry is whether a foreign state has been behind some of these incidents. We're investigating, of course, all the possibilities. And we're clear that these actions will have consequences if that proves to be the case. Our message to Iran or to any other country that might seek to foment violence, hatred or division in society is that it will not be tolerated. That is why we're fast-tracking legislation to tackle these malign threats.
Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. So what are the specifics of this first, then, John? Investigating potential foreign involvement, target universities, and then we can also talk about what the Director of Public Prosecutions has said tonight as well.
Well, first of all, the Prime Minister held this major summit at Downing Street. It's 90 people in all. Everyone, business, CBI, Barclays, Charity Commission, BBC, Channel 4, National Theatre, Arts Council, universities, and police chiefs as well. Now, at that was where he talked about the threat from Iran. And he was talking there about fast-tracking legislation, which we expect to come in the King's speech on the 13th of May. He talked about that last week also when he had the prosecutors in. You mentioned universities there. There are a couple of things the Prime Minister said that really stood out in terms of action the government's going to take. Universities and cultural venues, he said. He said, we already expect universities to set out clear disciplinary consequences for anti-Semitism. But now he's saying, when abuses take place, we're calling on universities to demonstrate action. We expect them to publish the scale of the problem on their campuses, as well as specific steps they've taken to clamp down on it. No tolerance for inaction. Cultural venues, he said, where public funding is being used to promote or platform anti-Semitism. He's talking about the Arts Council there. The Arts Council must act using its powers to suspend, withdraw and claw back funding. Then, this evening, we've heard from the Director of Public Prosecutions, Stephen Parkinson. Now, he's not just talking about fast-tracking legislation, he's talking about fast-tracking court proceedings to speed things up in the courts. And the key thing he's saying is, where the evidence threshold for prosecution is satisfied, then a prosecution decision should not be delayed. Any supporting evidence can be obtained subsequently. So, in other words, they don't need all the facts to go ahead. Once they've reached the threshold, they can go ahead. And here's Stephen Parkinson talking tonight.
I think there's a lot of casual anti-Semitism, which is quite corrosive in terms of the safety and security of communities. And I don't think people are sufficiently aware of the fact that casual words, but designed to cause distress, actually involve criminality.
Well, Sonia, I know we've sprung you from revision for your legal exams this week. Do you think this is... I mean, the sort of the playbook of this is what happened after the Southport attacks, when we saw disturbances and riots and fast track of prosecutions. Yeah. Is this something you support, do you think, or do you have concerns?
I think there's no problem when things are very black and white, as they were in the wake of Southport, as they are with... We've seen so many incidents in recent weeks. Arson attacks, for example, in the vicinity of Golders Green. So I think what the DPP said about the threshold for charging is really important. I think where you don't want to be setting a precedent is if things are a bit grey and you're not quite sure, you just go ahead with prosecution anyway. And I think the last thing I would say is that one of the issues is that the problem with rising anti-Semitism is cultural. So legal tools only take you so far in curbing it because it's a cultural problem.
John, hold your thought. I just want to speak to Olivia. Let's cross then to Stamford Hill in North London, where an event has been taking place for the Jewish community tonight. Sky's Olivia Guthrie is there for us. And, you know, the overriding desire, no doubt, for people there is just to feel safe, Olivia.
Absolutely, and there has been an awful lot of security here today. They are now starting to pack up. But hundreds of Jewish families attended here in Stamford Hill earlier amid really tight security. They had metal barriers in the streets, and there were about 140 security personnel and police here to make sure that everything went smoothly. This is a very holy event in the Jewish calendar, but today they said, the organisers, that it was a really significant event today because the rabbi was offering special prayers in the wake of those anti-Semitic incidents that have taken place in recent weeks, including that stabbing of those 2 Jewish men in Golders Green last week, and the suspected arson attack in Whitechapel on a former synagogue only this morning. The Met Police Commissioner saying that Jews are facing their gravest threat to date in the UK, with the Prime Minister today having that meeting, that summit at Downing Street to tackle anti-Semitism. He said that the whole of society must not turn a blind eye to extremism. Now, the organisers here of this event told me that they often laugh at the solidarity salad of words that the Prime Minister offers up to them, but they hope that this time that he means to take action.
It's good that the Prime Minister is having those conversations and bringing together leaders from the business sector, arts, civil society to talk about how to tackle anti-Semitism. Some in the community will argue that that's too little, too late. But let's hope on this occasion, because he has said it before, and unfortunately we only saw the opposite happening. Let's hope he now takes it really serious and he does tackle anti-Semitism head-on and hopefully bring an end to this vicious rise in violent attacks on Jewish people.
Well, the Prime Minister is assuring the organisers of this event and the Jewish communities that he is taking anti-Semitism seriously. The Director of Public Prosecutions today saying that it is time to draw a line in the sand of what he has called a deeply troubling rise in anti-Semitic incidents across the country.
Olivia, thank you. John, I know you had a thought as well.
Just a bit more on what Stephen Parkinson's been saying tonight. He's talking about hate crime prosecutions. He's issuing new guidance to prosecutors. And he was asked, is it likely there'll be an increase in the number of anti-Semitic crimes prosecuted as terrorism? And he said, I think that's possible.
Ali?
I'm just thinking about what happened to Bob Villan saying death to the IDF. Anything? Does anybody know if anything happened? I don't know. The Prime Minister's talking about consequences for Iran. What does that mean? It's a cultural problem, as Sonia is saying. So how do we deal with the cultural problem? Is it banning marches? Is it banning slogans on marches? The Prime Minister can't hide behind saying to Sir Mark Rowley, you have to decide if globalised intifada is acceptable or not. It's not a public order issue. There's no public disorder on these marches. It is a question of what is acceptable language where people are feeling unsafe. Can't duck the issue. So the Prime Minister needs to lead. Enough of the platitudes, lead. There has to be a way of legitimately criticising the Israeli government, which a lot of people regard now as leading a pariah state, and not dehumanising ordinary British Jews trying to live their lives in security in this country.
And I think that we're running over. You won't have time to talk about the newspapers. And in fact, some of this is in the newspapers. So we'll come back with that very shortly.
best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Well, time now to see what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Let us start with The Guardian, which leads with Labour facing pressure after UK borrowing costs reached a 28-year high. It says it is caused by the war in the Middle East. That is also the lead story for the Financial Times, which warns of prolonged inflation. The Telegraph reports the First Minister of Wales has warned Keir Starmer could cost Labour the Senedd for the first time in its 27-year history, while the Mirror leads with a plea from Keir Starmer to voters ahead of Thursday's local elections. On the front page of the Metro, an Iranian activist says he has a target on his back after his personal information was published on a Telegram page aiming to identify overseas traitors. The small boats crisis featuring on the front of the Express as it describes the British asylum system as being broken. The Eye leads with a warning that millions could face flight cancellations this summer due to jet fuel shortages, with Britain expected to be one of the hardest hit. The Sun reports on the 13,000 flight cancellations in May due to the Iran war, with the headline, "Come cry with me." And the Star reports former Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has quit vaping after her children dubbed her the Vape Dragon. So let's talk more, including a news story which the Daily Mail is covering. It is a report issued by Labour talking about the Greens investigating, they say, more than 30 council candidates for alleged anti-Semitism.
That's right. And in recent weeks, we've seen some really terrible allegations emerge about Green candidates. I think there's no doubt that the Green Party has got an anti-Semitism problem in the same way that Labour did under Jeremy Corbyn. And I think the issue for the Greens is it's very unclear what their processes are to deal with it. I think this is partly a product, actually, of some of the worst offenders in the Labour Party when they were kicked out of the Labour Party. Many of them got very disillusioned when Keir Starmer became leader as well, people on the far left of the party, and they went and joined the Greens, and they've taken that anti-Semitism issue with them. And it's a huge issue because Zach Polanski, when he's been questioned about it, has sounded very, very defensive about it. He sort of seemed like he's been trying to minimise the issue, and I think it's a big problem for the Greens.
I can see John Craig loitering. Do you want to just run in quickly show me what you've got, John? There's no seat for you or anything.
No seat.
I'll move over.
And I don't
know... Crouch.
Right,
this is it,
quickly.
Anna.
Yep,
There
okay.
it is. The people Polanski has welcomed into his party. I shall hold it towards that camera, or even that one. That one.
Yeah.
Now, Labour Party says that it's a raft of harrowing anti-Semitism, dangerous conspiracy theories, appalling comments supporting Hamas and Russia made by Green Party candidates, unearthed by Labour, they say, and it talks about the people Mr Polanski's welcomed into his party. And there it is. It runs to about 34 pages. So they'll be well pleased that the Daily Mail has put it on their front page.
But the whole point, Ali, is there's an election on Thursday and, you know, once parties start to rise above the parapet, then they receive more, you know, inquisitive eyes, if I can put it that way.
Well, they also receive inquisitive eyes if there's an attack in Golders Green and then a certain party leader then puts out a tweet on social media about you know, implying whether the police acted properly. Comes from the top. Yeah. So Zach Polanski might be suddenly having a Damascene conversion to this whole issue in the last few days. I mean, it's very interesting. I'm glad he has. But, I mean, you're leading from the top. So, look, I think the left have got to... Parts of the hard left... And, by the way, it's interesting that I haven't heard any members of the Hope Not Hate community or the Together Alliance marching in solidarity with British Jews being persecuted on the streets of this country. I haven't seen them. Where are they? I mean, they're all ready to call out any anti-racism of any kind and for us to all prove that we're anti-racist. But when it comes to Jews, they're just fair game. I mean, I do find the hypocrisy of the left quite stark in this regard. And this is not to say, again, that you cannot criticise the government of Israel and certain complete nutters within the extremist government of Israel, of which there are extremists, who want to engage in land acquisition in the West Bank, Gaza, and even southern Lebanon.
Yeah,
you can do that, but you don't have to attack
We haven't got time
Jews.
to drill into every single part of this, but I mean, this is obviously a new report. You know, John, what's Labour trying to do here? Are they out to get them?
I suppose the Greens would say they smear the Greens. Yes, of course they're out to get them because they're facing a threat in some of their urban strongholds, inner city strongholds. Greens have been polling quite well. Polanski's had a tough time in recent days, some would say deservedly so. I mean, his comments about the police action up in Golders Green, well, they were strongly attacked. Do you remember the letter from Sir Mark Rowley criticising him? On television at the weekend here on Sky News, he was talking about having a meeting with Mr. Sir Mark about that. Well, I suppose you could argue no such thing as bad publicity, but this is not great publicity, is it?
And I think a key question will be how much does this impact the Greens? Because traditionally the Greens have been seen as quite a cuddly, environmentally friendly party.
Zach Polanski's personal polling I saw today has gone down sharply, but we will see. You know, a lot of the newspapers are actually leading on election-based issues. But in the meantime, let's go to impact of the Iran war, which is The Guardian and the Financial Times. Ali, I mean, this looks seriously worrying for Rachel Reeves. Labour under pressure. Borrowing costs have gone up again. And they're now talking about prolonged inflation. I mean, this will impact every single one of us.
Look, the 30-year gilt yield now is 5.77%. The 10-year gilt yield is 5.11%. Yields are rising. The cost of borrowing is rising. What does that mean? That means that the markets are concerned about the credit quality of the British government. We're basically borrowing too much. And it was Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of England, now Prime Minister of Canada, who said years ago, we're dependent on the kindness of strangers. And then Andy Burnham comes out and says that we can't be in hock to the bond markets. Well, of course, you don't have to be in hock to the bond markets, but if you borrow at the level you do to fund spending, then you're going to have to be in hock to the bond markets. We are at a serious risk in this country of stagflation, flatlining economic growth.
Have we not had that? I mean, that's a strange thing to ask, but I mean...
Well, it's already
flatlining,
of it. But now we've got inflation rising too. And you've also got oil hovering around, bumping around $125 a barrel last week. That's also not good. You're also seeing fertiliser costs rise, helium costs rise. That will feed into semiconductor manufacture. This is going to be a complete bloodbath. I mean, this is really very, very concerning. I mean, you've even got Mohammed Al-Arian, who watches these things very, very closely, saying that this is really not looking good at all for the government. And we talk about fiscal headroom. That could be wiped out like that if you've got increased inflation out, 3.3%, interest rates rising, and the Bank of England now, no economist in the city is factoring in any interest rate cuts this year. They were factoring mostly, the consensus was around 2. Gone.
God. Goodness me, it's hard work. But in the meantime, you know, we focus on jet fuel. The suggestion is that the Eye and the Sun, you know, 13,000 flights already axed for the May schedules.
Yeah, I think there's a question about how exactly this will impact on consumers. So I've definitely heard travel experts, people from the airline industry saying essentially that there will be cutbacks potentially in the number of flights over the summer, but it will tend to be flights that go to those destinations where there are multiple flights per day. So experts think it's unlikely that, you know, you might have ended up booking a flight to a destination and you just can't get there at all for your holiday, which is reassuring to some extent. I think it's interesting, actually, the politics on this. There's been a bit of a fallout between the government and the airline industry, with the government coming out, some very cynical people might say it's Keir Starmer making a big deal of this because he doesn't want to be knocked off the top job by his MPs, but saying, look, we're in the middle of a crisis here, jet fuel could run out. And actually, you've had some airline industry people, for example, the chief exec of Ryanair, coming out and sort of saying, Prime Minister, keep your nose out. We know how to manage this. Don't panic our customers, because they obviously don't want their customers to stop booking flights over the summer period for fear of disruption. So there is definitely a difference of opinion, I think, on how much this could end up impacting consumers.
Well, it's the lead for the Sun as well. Families face holiday heartache, they say, after 13,000 flights this month were cancelled due to the Iran war. They talk openly about looming jet fuel shortages. I mean, deeply concerning, where they're all talking about the fact that the Middle East is dangerously close to reigniting its conflict after, Iran launched a barrage of drones and missiles at the United Arab Emirates, later denied by them. But they're clearly battling for the Strait of Hormuz to be opened. We've heard, certainly from the Americans today, it's to save 23,000 sailors. But this is economic warfare, isn't it, Ali?
It is economic warfare, and it's going to affect ordinary people. It's going to affect their holidays potentially, and I hope it doesn't ruin holidays. I just booked my own flight to southwest France for my friend's 50th birthday. I hope I make it there, because it will be pretty sad if I don't. But, it is what it is. Things are looking pretty dire. Economically, this is a complete bloodbath. We're heading effectively, potentially, to a recession. I don't want to talk us into a recession. But frankly, all of those tankers that had left the Strait of Hormuz months ago have now docked wherever they were going. Now you're going to see in the next few weeks and months, and I guess the markets also had cognitive dissonance on this, because no one wanted to face up to how bad this could be, and they were factoring a short, sharp end to the war. I can't see it ending at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I see, if we go back to the eye, up the top, it's the fate of Keir Starmer. Now, economically, they're riding a very bumpy wave at the moment. His argument, right at the top in yellow, back me or you'll need another general election. Starmer's message for Labour mutineers. It is elsewhere in the papers as well. This is absolutely a crunch week, is it not, for the government? Never mind the economics, the politics is writ large.
Absolutely. And I mean, there is an extent to which, back me or you'll need another general election. Well, he would say that, wouldn't he? Because he's trying to cling on with everything that he's got. His allies are out briefing the press this week saying, we know it's going to be a really terrible week, but we are actually telling our backbench MPs, if any of you make any moves, you're never getting a promotion again, which, quite frankly, if that's what you've got to say to keep your backbenchers in line, it does show how badly things are going. I suspect that we won't see any immediate moves on Keir Starmer straight after the local election results, although you never know. I think one thing that hasn't been factored in is the scale of the losses. People rationally know how many, if they're a Labour MP, how many local council seats they may lose. Emotionally, though, imagine if you're a Labour MP in an area that's only ever had a Labour council and then your Labour councillors are losing their seats in droves. It's going to feel very difficult for Labour MPs over the weekend. So who knows what might happen?
Like parts of Wales, for example, which takes us to the Daily Telegraph. Starmer could cost us the election, says the Welsh leader. For the first time in its 27-year history, this is the First Minister of Wales, which really is not a great prognosis with days to go.
Well, it could do, but all we do is read for a week in, week out about various plots going on in the Labour Party. Look, Starmer's a dead man walking. He's running a zombie government. He's in office, not in power. However, if I was Starmer's advisor, I would say, Prime Minister, stick it out. If they want to get you out, power is taken, never given. He should stick it out. I mean, who's he going... The reason why he's still there is because they cannot coalesce around a sensible alternative. Angela Rayner's still got her tax affairs to sort out. Andy Burnham's not even in Parliament. Wes Streeting needs to sort out the NHS and stop plotting, although he would deny that he is, of course. And Yvette Cooper, well, you can just see what she did as Home Secretary and people can draw their own conclusions. There is no standout candidate right now that they can coalesce around, which is in Starmer's favour. I would say face them down. They want to turf you out. Go out with your fingernails.
OK, we'll see what happens. So let's move on. There's another story that we've got here. Civil servants fake office attendance in a working-from-home scandal. This has long been a bugbear for the Telegraph.
It has, and sometimes you read these stories and you do wonder, is there an agenda here? Because some papers have got a massive agenda around saying that there's loads of waste in the civil service and we need to cut back. But some of the details of this story do sound concerning. They're sort of about departments like HM Land Registry, HMRC. So the new edict is, since the pandemic, that people have to be in 3 days a week. And there are some stories of people sort of not having gone in for months, but driving into the car park and logging into the office Wi-Fi to make it look like they've been in to the system and then driving home again. So I don't know how widespread an issue this is. I think there is a certain degree to which some of this stuff gets exaggerated by papers that have got a political interest in saying the civil service is fat and bloated and we need to sack a load of civil servants. But if
I was going to say, it feels like
you're talking about me there. Dear Sonia.
No, it felt like the focus back on the civil service again, didn't it? When you mentioned it. Just a very quick word on this one as well, then.
Look, I think there is a balance to be struck with working from home. I think you can actually have high productivity at home, but I do also think that there are huge merits in actually being in the office and collaborating together. And I think if you do have civil service departments where people aren't in at all for months on end or years on end, which is what it's saying here, that is not a good thing.
I've just spotted the Mac cartoon, actually, down the bottom of the Telegraph, which is a title saying, it's tiny, good luck with finding it. Record pub closures. Yeah. I went on a pub crawl and I've come home sober. You know, the news today that 2 pubs are closing a day there. So that is the Mac cartoon in the Telegraph. We're discussing that after the break.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the 2 nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between 2 nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
With respect, Minister, answer the question. It's you. Hello and welcome, I'm Cathy Newman. So could the outcome of these elections be manipulated? New me, new show, new furniture. Hard news needs a hard chair. I feel like I'm in therapy. Oh, there's room for 2 on this one. Do you think people will take me seriously with my feet up?
Sorry, madam, but we're closing now.
Oh, sorry. Sofa sorted. Let's get this show on the road.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed. Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Now, around 2 pubs a day shut for good in the first 3 months of the year. The British Beer and Pub Association says the closures led to the loss of around 2,400 jobs. A 15% tax relief for pubs and music venues came into effect last month. But Dawn Hopkins, owner of the Rose Inn and vice chair of the campaign for pubs, says more needs to be done to save them.
It's really worrying about the acceleration in the rate of pubs that are closing. I think this time last year it was one pub a day. They're now saying 2. We're a industry as a whole. The hospitality industry puts in over £50 billion into the treasury each year. We employ 3.5 million people. So we're not a luxury. We're not something that can just be like, we'll just push them to the side. We're essential to the economy and we're essential to our communities. But actually, at the moment, you can see with these statistics that we're absolutely in crisis.
So, Ali, where's the crisis come from?
Well, I'm just trying to work out whether you need the intelligence of a NASA rocket scientist to work out that if you impose a triple whammy on pubs, which is an increase in national insurance, business rates, which they've had to, capitulate and come down on, and an increase in the minimum wage, it might actually affect businesses, i.e. lead to closures. I mean, do you have to be that intelligent to work this out? Do you have to have a whole career in business to work it out? I don't think so. I think you just have to talk to a few pub owners and they'll tell you. I mean, this is a serious issue, and it's not just pubs. It's hospitality, it's restaurants. People are really suffering out there. It's so expensive to go out anyway. It's really, really tough on inflation. People are already put off, and on top of that, you're piling on all these extra costs on people who are already struggling to get people through the door.
But there are extras, aren't there? That younger people aren't drinking so much. People are drinking at home.
I mean,
it's cheaper, and the COVID years made it difficult.
That's
people.
true.
So, I mean, there's all of that as well.
These are long. I mean, Ali is absolutely right that there are a number of short-term factors, some of which have been imposed by the government, that are affecting this. But there are a number of long-term trends as well, which have been affecting the pub industry. And but I think it's really right to look at least short-term relief, possibly longer-term relief on some of these things, because the point is that pubs, we joke about it, but they are a sort of pub. They bring a public good. When you've got places where you're losing your last pub or two, they can function as sort of parts of the community where people can go to hang out. It's troubling to see these kind of institutions, some of it which have been around for hundreds of years, disappear because they're just not economically viable.
Has the Chancellor ever expressed concern about her national insurance increase, which has really increased the costs for the lower end of the market, and also the rate at which people pay? I mean, it fundamentally made a difference, did it not, to industries where you don't pay people great wages?
It was a position that she sort of forced herself into through Labour's manifesto pledges not to increase the big 3 taxes on individuals. Actually, I mean, national insurance, employer contributions, fine, it's a tax on employers, but it's quite a bad tax in the sense that it disproportionately targets employers of low-paid workers. It disproportionately targets that end of the market, which,
and it kicks in earlier. They changed the rate at which it starts.
We've got young people unemployed, really high rates of youth unemployment. So you don't want to be affecting that end of the market.
What can be done?
Well, I mean, look, what can be done? Another U-turn. That's what can be done. I mean, we've had U-turn central with this government.
You've just talked about her headroom disappearing because of the cost of borrowing.
Well,
she's not going to U-turn on national insurance.
I mean, U-turn if you want to. The Prime Minister's constantly for turning, is what they say. I mean, this government U-turns all the time because they don't do the homework. They don't look around the corners first. They've got very bad advisors. They don't talk to people who are actually in these business communities before they make these ridiculous decisions. But we are where we are. And on top of that, we've forgotten Angela Rayner's day one rights that she threw on businesses too to chuck into the mix as intelligent a move as the Renters' Rights Bill, but we won't go there. So this government doesn't think through anything.
I need to get to the weather. We're going to find some cheer in the next hour. I'm determined to do that. Here's the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the next few days do look cooler with a scattering of showers, some thundery by the weekend. I thought we were finding cheer. Anyway, I expect a largely fine start tomorrow, but there will be a few showers around, mainly in the west. It'll be chilly for many, a rural frost in the north. The morning will bring more showers to the west, some heavy across southwest England, but the northwest of Ireland looks fine. Elsewhere, it will be mainly dry with sunny spells, but eastern England will see a few showers too. So temperatures will be below average, especially in the north and the east. The afternoon will be similar, but more general rain will affect the far north and west of Scotland. Wet and windy there on Thursday. Elsewhere, a scattering of showers. Southeast of England will largely avoid them and stay fine.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, coming up in the next hour of The Wrap, we'll look at Donald Trump's call for Iran to wave the white flag of surrender as they battle again over the Strait of Hormuz.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim. I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be all out to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Tonight on The Wrap, who has the upper hand in the Strait of Hormuz? Growing tensions as the US and Iran continue their battle for control of the shipping lane. President Trump calls on Tehran to give up the struggle.
They should wave the white flag of surrender.
Plans to fast-track hate crime prosecutions as the Prime Minister chairs a summit to drive forward the UK's response to a series of attacks on the Jewish community. Spain says it will host the cruise ship at the centre of a deadly hantavirus outbreak as the Foreign Office says it's working to get stranded British travellers off the liner. In sport, Arsenal beat Atletico Madrid to reach the Champions League final for the first time in 20 years. Well, we discussed the day's biggest stories with the broadcasters and journalists, Sonia Soda and Ali Mirage, plus a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers, including a warning of prolonged inflation as UK borrowing costs soar. Well, hello and good evening to you, Sonia and Ali. Welcome to both of you as well. Since Donald Trump decided to pick a fight with Iran back in February, we've had some mixed messaging. The military operation would soon be over. Iran has been begging for a ceasefire, but it is the Strait of Hormuz that has remained the main point of contention throughout. And tonight, both the US and Iran have laid claim to control of the key shipping lane. Hormuz, once again, Sonia.
Absolutely. The chaos goes on. The strait remains closed pretty much, and it's continuing to have a huge impact on economies worldwide. We've had some bad news today here in the UK. Borrowing costs are up, the highest that they've been in 3 decades. So it doesn't feel like that the end is in sight.
Well, Donald Trump's saying that the Iranian regime should wave the white flag of surrender. Look, Donald Trump has to realise that he's not dealing with obsequious Republicans in Congress here. He's dealing with an Iranian regime that basically has got him in a very difficult position. He's dealing with asymmetric warfare where they can wreak havoc with drones, which they have done, and they effectively have operating a toll booth in the Strait of Hormuz now. It's a real embarrassment for the US.
OK, well, the US Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, maintains the ceasefire with Iran is holding, yet Iran has sent dozens of missiles and drones towards the United Arab Emirates in the past 24 hours. For President Trump, a belief there's one way to end the deadlock: Iran should throw in the towel.
They should wave. They're very proud. Maybe you won't see a white flag, but essentially that's already what they need. They should wave the white flag of surrender.
Yes, he was speaking earlier. Pete Hegseth saying that the truce was not over, but as he hailed a new US initiative to escort ships through the strait, Tehran claimed its control over the waterway had intensified. At the same time, the United Arab Emirates said it was coming under further attack from Iran.
No, the ceasefire is not over. Ultimately, this is a separate and distinct project, and we expected there would be some churn at the beginning, which happened. And we said we would defend and defend aggressively, and we absolutely have. Iran knows that, and ultimately, the president's going to make a decision whether anything were to escalate into a violation of a ceasefire. But certainly, we would urge Iran to be prudent in the actions that they take to keep that underneath this threshold. This is about the straits. This is about freedom of navigation. This is about international waterways. This is about free flow of commerce, all the things that happened before, and only Iran is contesting. So right now, the ceasefire certainly holds, but we're going to be watching very, very closely.
Well, let's get the thoughts then of our US correspondent, James Matthews.
We had a day of the Americans reframing the conflict and its part in it, less as an offensive military act, more of a defensive operation. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke of defensive US actions in the Strait of Hormuz. Rubio, well, he spoke of civilians trapped, called Iran's blockade desperate and destructive, and he presented America's action now as almost benevolent, a humanitarian cause, entirely in keeping with a Trump administration recharacterizing its involvement as its appeals for international help in breaking the diplomatic impasse. It's becoming a consistent message from the Americans, the call for other countries to engage in diplomacy. The US now is pushing a resolution to the UN Security Council looking for diplomatic support. Marco Rubio, he invoked international law. He said the Strait of Hormuz was an international waterway, therefore international law should apply. That will sit uneasily with critics who question Donald Trump's adherence to such laws. The same critics wouldn't have missed Rubio's avowed wish for the Strait to be back the way it was. Of course, it was not a problem before the US-Israeli action. Let's listen to a bit of Marco Rubio.
The operation, Epic Fury, is concluded. We achieved the objectives of that operation. I'm not going to, we're not cheering for an additional situation to occur. We would prefer the path of peace. What the president would prefer is a deal. He would prefer to sit down, work out a memorandum of understanding for future negotiations that touches on all the key topics that have to be addressed, a full opening of the Strait so the world can get back to normal. And he preferred that be negotiated through the route that Steve and Jared have been working and that all of us have been supporting. That's the route he prefers. That is so far not the route that Iran has chosen.
The US Secretary of State highlighted the economic pain that Iran would suffer going forward, but generally the tone from the Trump administration yesterday was less belligerent than we've heard of late.
So, Ali, what has changed then? So the Americans claiming 2 US commercial ships, along with American destroyers, have proceeded through the Strait, showing that the lane is clear. They say they're talking to shipping companies and insurers to try to get all of them moving to rescue, in the words of Marco Rubio, 23,000 sailors who've been holed up for more than a month now. The problem is Iran does not agree that the lane is clear. So, what happens next?
Can you believe anything that the US government says or the Iranian government says?
Well, we could probably
I can't.
those
I don't
two,
know.
Couldn't we?
I honestly don't know. What I do know is this, that Pistol Pete needs to go and audition for Top Gun Maverick 2 because he's got no credibility at all. All this nonsense, hyperbole, no one's buying it anymore, Pete. Just give it a rest. I mean, the reality is Marco Rubio is coming out and talking about a negotiated settlement with Iran, which is what President Trump supposedly wants. Sorry, I'm a little bit confused because in February in Geneva, they were engaging in discussions around a deal with Iran. And in the middle of that, in the negotiations, they started bombing with Iran. Right? There is an agreement in place with Iran. It's called the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, negotiated by the Obama regime in 2015, which actually talked about sanctions relief for non-enrichment of uranium or controlled enrichment of uranium with international inspections. That's where we're going to end up. Why don't they just accept the fact they're galactically screwed up, they're being humiliated, Merz was right? And unfortunately, they're dealing with a regime that's got absolutely nothing to lose. And Iran is a theocracy, it's a dictatorship. They don't have to assuage their people. It's a completely different starting point.
But at that point, we remember the tens of thousands of protesting Iranians who lost their lives in the hope of overthrowing the mullahs and the IRGC. And just that, that was underpinning some of what President Trump thought.
But no, but
that was a justification for a while.
They don't care about Iranian protesters. Come on.
But I do think it's very important to be clear that the Iranian regime is despotic and evil, and it murders its young people.
I was arguing that.
So no, but it's sometimes easy to forget, I think, when we get mired in the, what's going on between the US and Iran. It doesn't make the US action right, because the US clearly didn't have a plan. I think the US went in thinking that the Iranian regime would just somehow topple after 2 or 3 days. But I do think it's really important to remember just what sort of regime that we're dealing with.
No more or less important than remembering that the Taliban were an evil regime too, and they're back in power after 20 years and $2 trillion spent.
But I'm not making the case for US intervention. I just think that there is no harm in sometimes remembering that this is a regime that's hanging its young people. I'm not justifying the US, but sometimes people who are attacking the US intervention seem to be slightly too sympathetic. Not you, but some people seem to be a bit...
But I would also say this, that the US bombing bridges and bombing schools and everything else, which hasn't come out and said if it did or not, we still don't know, but the investigation's not clear. I think I'll take it with a bit of a pinch of salt when people tell me that they were trying to help poor Iranian protesters. I really will.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that some of the Iranian protesters have welcomed the US intervention.
Some have,
so,
and there are loads who haven't.
Just quickly, we're back out of the state of a precarious ceasefire, are we not? Which means, once again, it affects the markets. The Guardian and the Financial Times both talking about long-term borrowing costs in the UK hitting the highest in decades as prolonged inflation looms. I mean, this is deeply worrying for government and consumer alike, is it not?
Yes, it is. It's very worrying for the UK consumer because our gilt yields are extremely high now. We've got 5.77 on the 30-year 5.11 on the 10-year, which means the borrowing costs are going up. That is bad news for the Chancellor, whose fiscal headroom is really not that high. I mean, it was higher than the last time, but frankly, if we have a situation where we have increased inflation in this country, that is going to remove that fiscal headroom. If interest rates go up, the cost of borrowing goes up. And we're still borrowing a shed load in this country with paltry growth.
And meantime, both the Eye and the Sun are talking about our holidays again, the prospect of a jet fuel crisis, with the suggestion now that 13,000 flights have been scrubbed from the May schedules already, and that the UK is, in a worse position than many nations in terms of jet fuel.
Well, like many countries, like many other kind of industries, we tend to be very exposed in the UK, and I think that's what we're seeing with travel. The thing I will say is that things that travel experts, industry watchers have said in recent days is that while this sounds very scary, 15,000 flights wiped, airlines will be doing it in a way they'll be cutting flights where they're operating several flights a day to a destination, for example. So hopefully people aren't going to be, they may be shifted flights, but hopefully people are not going to be able to, it's not going to be the case that people are actually not going to be able to get places. So we'll have to wait and see what happens over the summer.
It's about empty seats and merging flights. And the Sun's front page as well, come cry with me, they say, holds chaos over fuel shortages. And, the point being that actually this is not bitten yet, which is the worrying part of all of this. Now, lots of lines developing in terms of anti-Semitism. First of all, hate crime prosecutions are set to be fast-tracked because of the increase in the number of anti-Semitic attacks. The Director of Public Prosecutions has issued new guidance to prosecutors because of what he called a deeply troubling rise in anti-Semitic incidents. Well, earlier, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, warned that any attempts by Iran to incite anti-Semitism or destabilise British society would not be tolerated as the UK government investigates possible foreign involvement in a series of hate-linked attacks. The PM speaking in Downing Street, hosting an emergency meeting of senior figures from across public life to discuss tackling growing anti-Semitism in the UK.
We must also deal with the forces that drive this hatred in the first place. So we're confronting them directly. One of the lines of inquiry is whether a foreign state has been behind some of these incidents. We're investigating, of course, all the possibilities. And we're clear that these actions will have consequences if that proves to be the case. Our message to Iran or to any other country that might seek to foment violence, hatred or division in society is that it will not be tolerated. That is why we're fast-tracking legislation to tackle these malign threats.
Well, let us bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig. So many lines breaking tonight. We saw Keir Starmer earlier, the Director of Public Prosecutions now suggesting fast-tracking, a little bit like after the disturbances and riots with the Southport killings, John.
Yes, so first of all, we had the Prime Minister's summit, 90 people there, everything from universities to broadcasters to police chiefs and so on. And two things, as well as what he was saying about Iran, stood out for me. First of all, crackdown on anti-Semitism in universities. He said when abuses take place, we're calling on universities to demonstrate action, expect them to publish the scale of the problem, specific steps they're taking to clamp down on it. No tolerance for inaction. And also then the arts. We expect more, the Prime Minister says. Where public funding is being used to promote or platform anti-Semitism, the Arts Council must act using its powers to suspend, withdraw and claw back funding. And then tonight we've heard from the DPP, that is Stephen Parkinson, who has given new guidance to courts and prosecutors, in particular his team, the CPS. He says, where the evidence threshold for prosecution is satisfied, a prosecution decision should not be delayed. Any supporting evidence can be obtained subsequently. So, in other words, you don't need to wait for all the evidence. Once you've reached the threshold, go ahead, get them into court. This was the DPP speaking this evening.
I think there's a lot of casual anti-Semitism, which is quite corrosive in terms of the safety and security of communities. And I don't think people are sufficiently aware of the fact that casual words, but designed to cause distress, actually involve criminality.
So, John, developing further, Labour has produced a document criticising Green candidates who they suggest are being probed over anti-Semitism. So what's the latest on that?
Here it is. It's 34 pages, quite a meaty thing. Clearly, the Labour Party a bit rattled by the Green Party threat. They have responded in the last few minutes. They said, we're standing over 4,500 candidates in these elections, vast majority of whom we're proud to have represent us. Where there are examples brought to our attention that don't align with the values of the party, we're looking into them. Some cases, candidates have been suspended. We're investigating, strengthening our vetting procedures, etc., to prevent inappropriate candidates slipping through the net. Well, the claim in here is that some of their candidates have said anti-Semitic and inappropriate things. It's a row 2 days before polling day, isn't it?
Well, one wonders. It's a row that's made the front page, Ali, of the Daily Mail.
I don't know if it's going to do them any harm in the areas which they want to win, frankly, because there are people there that might actually be endorsing these kind of views, but it certainly looks bad for Zach Polanski. He's down in his personal popularity ratings. Clearly, this anti-Semitism issue is a serious thing. Just one thing that John, you said about Starmer trying to clamp down on people who are anti-Semitic being called out in universities and in arts institutions and things. That's part of it. The other part of it is that people who are British Jews feel that they are being shunned and ignored and chastised and not given the same opportunities anymore that they formerly were because of anti-Israeli views.
OK, so, I mean, going back to the point you made at the start of that, is Zach Polanski chasing the Muslim vote? And is the Muslim vote turning its back on Keir Starmer, which we saw at the Gorton and Denton by-election? Sonia, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. that is part of it's not the whole Green success story by any means. They're also picking up lots of other types of different voters who are disillusioned with Labour as well, including younger voters, for example, younger voters in inner city areas. But attracting Muslim voters is definitely part of what's working for the Green Party. But I actually think it's very striking, actually, that Zach Polanski's personal ratings have dropped off in recent days. And I think this is what happens when you make the transition from being a very fringe party to a party which people are suddenly paying a lot of attention to, because all of a sudden you're actually, outperforming Labour, or, well, not quite, but almost outperforming Labour in some polls. Then there's more attention. And I think one of the problems for the Greens is they have mopped up a lot of people, a lot of members who are expelled from the Labour Party for anti-Semitism. And it's clear that they didn't have the procedures needed to say, sorry, you're not a member, sorry, you're not standing for election because of things that you said in the past. I think it could be a real problem for them, actually.
Yeah, I mean, John, the talk was a couple of weeks ago that Greens could gain 1,000 councillors on the night. I don't know what the latest figures are. Will this dent that, do you think? Because there is polling that shows Zach Polanski's personal rating has gone down. And I interrupted whatever you were
I was going to say, I think what offended a lot of people was his criticism of the police up at Golders Green, where he accused them of being a bit heavy-handed with the suspect. Now, that provoked an angry reaction from Sir Mark Rowley, who wrote a pretty strong letter. I remember talking about it here, the sort of letter you'd normally expect to be written by a politician rather than by a police chief. And on Sky News, I think it was with Trevor Phillips on Sunday, he was saying he's now going to have a meeting with the Met Commissioner. Well, the Met Commissioner was pretty furious with him because, of course, he talked about the bravery that his officers showed in tackling the guy who they feared was going to either stab more people or cause injury to more people, members of the public, in some other way.
John, OK, thank you very much indeed. But as you say, there'll be more coverage later on because there's more politics in the papers ahead of that election, which is going to be absolutely fascinating. Coming up next, though, we will talk about the British travellers who are stuck on board that cruise ship, which has been hit by a deadly virus.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Well, let's go now to the plight of British travellers who are stuck on board a cruise ship which has been hit by an outbreak of the deadly disease hantavirus. The Foreign Office says it's putting plans in place to bring them home. 3 people have died. A British man remains in intensive care. And this evening, Spain's health ministry has said it will host the liner in the Canary Islands and expected to arrive in the next 3 to 4 days. Let's get more then from Ashish Joshi.
It's sold as an Antarctic Odyssey, a spectacular 42-night cruise from the Antarctic Circle, crossing the equator to the coast of West Africa. A once-in-a-lifetime dream.
For going in the ice and spotting wildlife like whales, this is a perfect ship.
The ship's chef posted this picture on the night before they set sail. But Kabir Moraes, on the bottom right, and his shipmates on board the MV Hondias did not know that their dream would turn into a nightmare. Just 10 days into their cruise, a passenger died, others fell critically ill, and the ship is now at the centre of a suspected hantavirus outbreak. The MV Hondias set sail on the cruise, which cost anywhere between £6,000 and £18,000 on the 1st of April, from Argentina. It made its way through the southern Atlantic Ocean on its way to Cape Verde on the 3rd of May, and that's where it remains.
The plan now is for the ship to continue on to the Canary Islands. We're working with Spanish authorities who will welcome the ship, have said that they will welcome the ship, to do a full investigation, a full epidemiologic investigation, full disinfection of the ship, and of course to assess the risk of the passengers that are actually on board.
Hantavirus is spread through rodent droppings, urine or saliva. The virus particles, once dried out, can be breathed in. Early symptoms are like flu, but can turn into a deadly infection of the lungs or kidneys. Human-to-human transmission is extremely rare, but WHO experts think that this may be happening on board the Hondias. So far, 3 passengers have died, a German traveller and a Dutch couple, whose family paid this tribute. The beautiful journey they experienced together was abruptly and permanently cut short. We are still unable to comprehend that we have lost them. We wish to bring them home and commemorate them in peace and privacy. WHO medical experts are on board the ship. Critically ill passengers and crew will be medevaced. The Canary Islands had been mentioned as a possible destination, but there is pushback from the local authorities there.
They will be transferred to the Netherlands, and from there, once they've completed quarantine and so on, they would have to be repatriated. I believe the decision is the right one, not only for those passengers who are affected and need medical care, but also for everyone's safety, those on board the ship, as well as those of us on land.
For now, the ship remains marooned off the coast of Cape Verde. The ordeal for the passengers and crew of the MV Hondias is not yet over. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
Yes, this has been so difficult, hasn't it, for everybody on board. And the WHO now suggesting, because of the incubation of hantavirus, 1 to 6 weeks, it's very likely that patient 1, brought this on board the vessel. It didn't originate on board the ship.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. 3 people have already lost their lives. There are over 130 people on this vessel who must be very, very concerned. A number of other cases also need to be looked at. Now, the race is to get people out safely, and individual countries need to take some responsibility for their own nationals. But if they are taken off, they need to be, I guess, quarantined. I'm not an expert on how these things work, but we certainly don't want further spread occurring. And it clearly very distressing for people who have gone on a holiday and end up in this situation.
Yes, and the WHO suggesting that our assumption is that they were infected off the ship, perhaps doing some activities. The initial patient and his wife both joined in Argentina. This was an expedition boat. Many of the people on board were doing bird watching, and they were doing a lot of other things with our wildlife. So our assumption is they were infected off the boat and then joined the cruise, and then there was human-to-human transmission.
And it's very rare with this virus, apparently, to have human-to-human contact. But I think the WHO hypothesis is this is how it must have spread on the boat, and it's perhaps because of the close contact that people have with each other on cruise ships. But, I mean, how awful. This is clearly the trip of a lifetime for some people. I mean, 40 days, 5 weeks, sailing from the Antarctic to the coast of West Africa. And basically, it's just turned into absolute hell for the people on board that ship. There's obviously 3 people who've really sadly died. There's a couple more people who are critically ill. But, this is what happens when you're on a cruise ship, you're in international waters, you're stuck on that boat and you can't get off. And there have to be all these negotiations about where you can go, where you'll be medevac from. And it must be incredibly worrying, both for the people on the ship who know that some people have caught this virus on the ship and fallen so critically ill, but also people who've got loved ones on the boat.
Yeah, absolutely, especially if there is human-to-human transmission.
Yes.
Even though everyone says the risks are low, that would, explain why some nations have been reluctant. But looks like it's on its way to either Gran Canaria or Tenerife. Seems to be the suggestion. We'll follow that, obviously. Should we take a look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers now? And let us start with The Guardian. It leads with pressure faced by Labour after UK borrowing costs reached a 28-year high. It says it's caused by the war in the Middle East. It's a story that also features on the front page of the Financial Times, which talks about long-term borrowing costs and the idea of prolonged inflation now. The Telegraph reports the First Minister of Wales has warned Keir Starmer could cost Labour the Senedd for the first time in its 27-year history. Elections on Thursday this week. While the Mirror leads with a plea from Keir Starmer to voters ahead of Thursday's local election. On the front of the Metro, an Iranian activist says he has a target on his back after his personal information was published on a Telegram page aiming to identify overseas traitors. The small boats crisis features on the front of the Express as it describes the British asylum system as being broken. The Eye leading with a warning that millions could face flight cancellations this summer due to jet fuel shortages, with Britain expected to be one of the hardest hit. The Sun reports on 13,000 flight cancellations in May due to the Iran war, with the headline, "Come Cry With Me." And The Star reports former Labour Deputy Leader Angela Rayner has quit vaping, and that after her children dubbed her the Vape Dragon. While The Times has the government announcing new measures to jail people for up to 14 years if they're found guilty of anti-Semitic attacks backed by Iran. So we mentioned the elections coming up, local elections for England, Scotland, Wales. It's going to be truly fascinating. Front page of the Daily Mirror, a plea from Keir Starmer, who has written inside, "We're still the only ones on your side," Ali.
Yes, I mean, he's written this piece, and in the Mirror he's talking about the fact that Reform want to effectively lead to division in the country, that Badenoch and Farage would have led us into a war with Iran. It's not our war, and the Greens would also not be the answer. So he's trying to do a fight back already. It's clearly going to be a very, very difficult week. That is what is expected. Even from a Starmer loyalist would expect that. But it's all priced in, really. So I'm not really sure where this leads us, other than this constant speculation about the Prime Minister's fate does no one any good. It doesn't do the country any good. It doesn't do the Prime Minister any good. And it certainly doesn't do the Labour Party any good. If they're going to move and get rid of him, just get on with it. Because this nonsense can't continue. I mean, he's effectively a dead man walking. He has no authority amongst his own party. But as I said, if I was him, I would stick it out, because frankly, there is no clear favourite which party members and people within Parliament can coalesce around right now, apart from Wes Streeting. If Wes Streeting wants to wield the knife, the story tells us that, you often don't wear the crown, but he might want to act quickly because his other rivals, Angela Rayner and Andy Burnham, have got their own issues at the moment to solve.
Yes, his op-ed, page 5 of the Daily Mirror says the Tories would take us to war and the Greens will leave NATO. So that's the inside pages. In the meantime, more bad news for Keir Starmer, and this is the Welsh leader, because, of course, Labour's been in power in Wales throughout its 27 years.
Absolutely, and it doesn't look like it's going to be in power anymore, shall we say, after Thursday. So this is interesting, because when the leader of Scottish Labour, Anas Sarwar, their candidate for Scottish First Minister, came out a few weeks ago and said that he thought Keir Starmer should just resign, we didn't see the same from the Welsh First Minister, from Baroness Morgan. She sort of kept her counsel at that point, shall we say. But she's not quite come out and said that Keir Starmer should resign, but it's a pretty stinging attack, given that it is the week of elections. And she seems to be saying, it could be if we lose here, which they're going to, the polls are pretty resolute on that, it's Keir Starmer's fault. So it sort of feels like she's lining it up for an attack on Starmer after Thursday. So, and I agree with Ali that there isn't, it's hard to see a very organised coup happening after Thursday, because none of the leadership contenders are really ready at the moment. But if you've got, say, Anas Sarwar and the First Minister of Wales lining up to say Keir Starmer's got to go, things could get quite chaotic quite quickly, and things may happen and play out in a way that Labour MPs weren't anticipating.
Yes. In England, more than 5,000 seats up for grab. The point being that Labour is defending more than half of the available seats. So a month ago, people were talking about Labour losing 1,500 councillors. It's now gone up to 1,800. Some people even talking about 2,000. The max it could lose is just over 2,500. You say it's priced in, but the number is not. The
number is not. But I mean, this speculation about Starmer's future has been going on for months now. I mean,
but the thing is, it will continue to go on, Ali, because you can't just have the Prime Minister say stop speculating when the Prime Minister is doing as badly in the polls. And the word from focus groups and doorsteps is people really don't like the Prime Minister. Speculation will be ongoing. The only way the speculation will stop, ultimately, will be if party grandees get together and figure out what to do about this. But it's a Labour Party. It's driven by factionalism. So the chances of that happening are quite small.
The eye just at the top there says, back may oil need another general election. Starmer's message for Labour mutineers. I think you've made that point already. In the meantime, Zach Polanski is definitely making headlines tonight. The Daily Mail already is talking about a Labour report into allegations that people standing in the elections have been accused of antisemitism. The Times now, Ali, has Zach Polanski falsely claimed to be a spokesperson for the British Red Cross. The focus, the laser focus is now on, what people class as insurgent parties.
Well, it's not just that. He's also, it emerged that Polanski was not a full member of the National Council for Hypnotherapy whilst working as a hypnotherapist. This is what the Times is alleging here, despite claiming to be that to potential clients. Look, Polanski, they're out for him. And if you're going to be tweeting images and casting aspersions on how the police deal with a potential attacker, well, someone who did attack two people in Golders Green, then you're going to be having this kind of scrutiny. I mean, he's had a very, very good ride until now. I think he's down 14 points already this week in terms of his personal popularity rating. We'll see how it plays out. Clearly, The Greens are appealing to a lot of Muslim voters who are very, very angry about what's going on in Gaza right now, and they've deserted Labour in their droves. And we saw that in previous elections, some of them went to George Galloway. Now the Greens are the party of choice for many of them.
The Green Party has given a response, actually, for the British Red Cross claims, suggesting that he had been a host for several fundraisers for the British Red Cross and had been on stage supporting its work.
That's not being a spokesperson, though, is it? So it's a sort of brave attempt, I think, by the Greens to say, oh, that there may be a kernel of truth in this. I mean, I think the truth is this story is very embarrassing. It's not as bad for the Greens as the anti-Semitic incidents, which I think are really terrible, and the fact that the Greens clearly haven't got a grip on process and what they do when some of their candidates for councils are, you know, exposed as having said some really pretty anti-Semitic things. This is kind of embarrassing, but it doesn't inspire trust. If you can't trust a politician to be honest about if he's embellishing his CV like this, it does sort of raise questions about whether he's trustworthy.
Maybe we need even more from him to properly defend himself on that story, but we'll see. But, you know, it's truly... We've got one more day of talking about this before we can't say anything until 10 p.m. on Thursday. I'll be here, and then Jonathan Samuels and, you know, the full host of Sky Politics team will be here to bring you those results overnight and right through Friday. In fact, some on Saturday as well, to be fair. It will be very interesting. More papers after the break. Back in a moment.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Including the latest for the United Arab Emirates, which says it came under attack by missiles, including cruise missiles, in the last day or so. But we know that Britons had been held in Dubai for filming. And, Ali, it seems that they've now been freed. Is that what the Times is telling us?
Yes, it's saying this. 12 Britons have actually were detained. They've now been let go. There were others as well. And this is all because they were trying to take pictures of effective drone attacks on Dubai. And Dubai were basically, the government was essentially saying, don't take pictures because they could be used by the Iranian regime to target specific places in Dubai. And also, it doesn't look particularly good on social media if you've got pictures of burning buildings in what is meant to be a haven of security in the Middle East, right? So
it's a salutary reminder, I think, that these countries are not liberal democracies and sometimes can be quite authoritarian themselves. And if you're a holiday maker there and find yourself on the wrong side of what they say is the law, you can actually find yourself in quite a lot of trouble.
Yes.
Sonia, let's go to the eye, shall we, with the news that the MV Hondius, the site of this hantavirus outbreak, is properly being investigated now by the UN agency, the World Health Organization, because of this rare human-to-human transmission, which is suspected.
That's right. So this virus, hantavirus, people pick it up from rat faeces, urine, saliva. It's meant to be incredibly rare that it spreads human to human. But the theory that the World Health Organization are now working on was that because of the long incubation period, they think that it was originally picked up in the port in Argentina when the ship left, and that there must have been human-to-human transmission on the ship. So they're going to be investigating that properly. We all know, from the pandemic, COVID pandemic, this is obviously on a much smaller scale, but we all know the importance of establishing exactly how these things spread. So that is what the World Health Organization is going to be doing. But meanwhile, 150 people remain trapped on the ship, and a very small number of them are critically ill.
I'd be intrigued by your views on the story we're coming to now on the front of the Daily Telegraph. It feels like education gone wrong to me. Welsh nurseries have been advised to report children for racist incidents and hate crime guidance. Nurseries, we're talking about under fives now, Ali.
What can one say? I mean, this country is turning into a joke. This is the Welsh nurseries have been advised by the Principality's Labour government. These are the Labour government that are worried about losing seats. Well, no wonder you're worried about losing seats. You're coming out with nonsense like this. I mean, ridiculous stuff. You're talking about kids here, like toddlers, are apparently meant to be getting involved in racist incidents. If they are, you're meant to call the police. I mean, seriously? I mean, how about a talking to and explaining how you treat people with respect? I mean, isn't that what you're meant to be doing as someone who's running a nursery school, rather than calling the police and wasting their time? We've already got enough issues with the police trying to tackle shoplifters, which they can't get to because they've got too many other things. And now we're going to add to their burden. If the Labour government get trounced in Wales on Thursday, that will be a good reason why.
OK, very quickly, we've got one more story after this.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, it sounds so crazy, it's kind of hard to believe in some ways, because apparently the advice is, if racist incidents happen in nurseries, presumably with toddlers involved, childcare workers may be advised to sort of call the police. And I kind of find it a bit hard to believe. Like, I'd like to actually see this guidance. If it's true, it's nuts.
Properly scary stuff, that. Anyway, let's go to the Scotsman, shall we? Parents using AI in rising abuse online of teachers.
Yeah, I mean, parents are apparently using AI in covert recordings of teachers as part of a rising tide of harassment in Scottish schools. Look, if you've got a breakdown in trust between parents and teachers already feeling that they are not only just meant to be imparting and sharing wisdom and knowledge and learning in the classroom, but also are bouncers, social workers, apparently also teaching people how to potty train at the age of 4 because a quarter of kids now can't even be potty trained before they go to school. And on the back of all that, parents are going to be secretly filming them to basically challenge them when they're trying to discipline their kids. Something seriously is broken down here. I mean, you're having a situation here where why would anyone want to become a teacher in this kind of environment?
I think Sonia, we are. Have we finished? I think we have. I do apologise. I'd love to have heard your thoughts. Sonia, Ali, absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much indeed. Got a lot of stories away, I think. We've got sport next. No guessing what the lead is. Celebrations in North London as Arsenal reached the Champions League final for the first time in 20 years.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
With respect, Minister, answer the question. It's you. Hello and welcome, I'm Cathy Newman. So could the outcome of these elections be manipulated? New me, new show, new furniture. Hard news needs a hard chair. I feel like I'm in therapy. Oh, there's room for two on this one. Do you think people will take me seriously with my feet up?
Sorry, madam, but we're closing now.
Oh, sorry. Sofa sorted. Let's get this show on the road.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out!
What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting. The whole neighborhood is rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty.
War isn't pretty.
News of Arsenal and more. Here's Mike.
James, can you do a big clap in front of your face?
Perfect. OK, mate, in your own time.
One word to describe James Milner.
Legend. Unique. Consistent.
Dedicated.
Intense.
Brilliant.
He just loves to win.
I think he's everything you'd want to be in a footballer.
The Premier League loves James Milner.
Hi James, congratulations on breaking the all-time Premier League appearance record and how hard it is to keep going. You felt phenomenal, so well done.
To be appreciated by your teammates and appreciate what you give, that's pretty special.
England's future looks healthy, and here at Leeds United's training ground, they reckon they're once again grooming tomorrow's World Cup stars.
The board now are realising that you've got to have your money in your academy, you've got to believe in it, because the spiralling costs of everything within the game, I think you've got to try and bring people through that you've blooded yourself.
Yeah, it was an amazing time being in the academy, and then you're seeing the likes of those guys come through. I remember Alan Smith scoring his first touch at Anfield, he was my hero. From being really young and going with my family, and as a Leeds fan, you know, it was a dream really being at the club and being in the academy of a team you supported.
James had a mentality that you would associate with an older, good professional.
Lucky enough to sign the old YTS back then at Leeds, and then we ended up sharing a room together. It was only Phils and Orsies, and then I think it was on the old PlayStation. We had a snooker game and we were obviously competitive and trying to get 147.
It was a training session basically, and this young lad got called in, and straight away you're all having a look at him, you know, what's he like, whose team's he going to be on. I would say 10 minutes into him coming over from, I think it might have been under 12s, but how old was he? He's only like 16, wasn't he? He did this one thing straight away, and everyone straight away went, oh, who's this lad here?
Young James Milner's only 16.
Didn't think I was going to get on, and to be fair, Terry gave me the nod to go on. Lee Bowyer passed me a ball with my back to goal, and I tried to pass it back and passed it to Paolo Di Canio, and he put it over the bar, thank God. And just remember Bo afterwards asking, did I have a bet on 4-all? I can't remember too much about being nervous playing against other Premier League players, because for me Leeds were an amazing team, and seeing Wayne Rooney doing what he was doing at that time, that obviously showed you again it was possible and someone else was doing it, and made you even more eager to go and train really well and take your chance when you got it on the pitch.
He's travelled a long way to get in the 6-yard box to finish that off, and I think that is typical of the type of player he is.
No, we're there to put the boots out.
So Project Freedom was launched by the Americans today, an effort to get ships that have been holed up in the Strait of Hormuz through the strait. President Trump has just spoken, saying Iran and the US have mutually agreed that while the blockade will remain in full force and effect, Project Freedom, which he described as movement of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, will be paused for a short period of time to see whether or not agreement can be finalised and signed. So they're still pushing for negotiations to take place to end the overall war. We'll get more on that, certainly, for you. Just see if we've got time for a quick weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
So next few days, cooler, a scattering of showers, some thundering by the weekend. Expect a largely fine start tomorrow, but there will be a few showers around, mainly in the west. Chilly for many, a rural frost in the north. The morning will bring more showers to the west, some heavy across southwest England.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.